Morning. So I woke up early and I went ahead and headed into Old St. Augustine town. And I'm walking around with the Nikon Z8 along with the Viltrox 16mm 1.8 lens, giving it a test run and seeing how it performs. A beautiful day, hot and muggy like always in Florida. My plan right now is to go ahead and show you some of the photographs that I took on this walk through St. Augustine using the 16mm Viltrox lens. Go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the specs as I'm walking along. And I'm also going to talk to you about my thoughts behind the photographs. For example, this was the first photograph I took as I started walking towards the city and over the Bridge of Lions. And what I found interesting about this photograph is the lines on the street. I had the street lights on the top, and I wanted to see just how well the lens kept lines straight. It's sharp all the way through and into the building where you see the letters on the signs. Everything looks really good. This photograph of the old VW bus, what I did here was compose the picture in a way where I could make it as interesting as possible. It was more really about trying to see how much distortion there is when you get down low. I shot the first photograph at an aperture of 7.1, and then I shot the second photograph of an aperture of 1.8 so that we could see the difference in depth of field. And even this wide, you can see where I blurred out a little bit of the background, and you can see it mainly on that sign in the back. So the main reason for my early start in the morning was to go ahead and get the sunrise as it was coming up over St. Augustine. It's really beautiful in the morning. The sun actually comes from the ocean side and lights up the entire town. And I thought it was going to be a really great opportunity to get some nice photographs with that nice orange glow. So this photograph was taken at ISO 200. The aperture was a 7.1 and I had a shutter speed of 1/200th of a second. I really had a lot of fun photographing the bridge on my way into the town. And you really had a lot of opportunities, even just on the bridge, to do a lot of different compositions. This photograph here, the bridge is lit really nice with the early morning sunlight, shooting at a 7.1 aperture and 1/200th of a second. And the ISO is 200 on these photos. I went ahead and waited for there to be no cars going over the bridge. What I love about this photograph is how these lines are all straight. You know, the street light going across and then the lamp posts on each side of the picture. And I really like the composition, the way that the lights are framing the bridge. And then I like the leading line from the rail of the bridge and the sidewalk leading into the old town. So I'm really happy with this photograph, and the image quality again is just outstanding. Then pretty much from the same location, found a way to compose the photograph in a different way where I'm still getting the leading lines from the bridge. But then you see to the right hand side the old town is being lit really nice with the sunlight. For this photograph, the aperture is at 8.0 and the ISO is still at 200, 1/60th of a second for my shutter speed. I went ahead and walked up closer to the two structures so that I can make them bigger in the frame. I still have the leading line from the rail on the bridge on the right hand side on the sidewalk. And then you see the street going into the city, and again, still have that beautiful sunlight as I'm making my way into the old town. Then as I got closer to the center of the bridge, I saw a way to make a composition where I have the bridge with a leading line on my left hand side. And then I like the way that I framed the photograph with the bottom pier, but I guess this is some kind of like a bumper so that a boat doesn't hit the bridge. But that's being lit up nice with the sunlight. And I really like the composition because it gives me something that fills in the bottom of the frame. And I think it adds interest to it instead of having some dead space at the bottom. So that was my thinking behind this photograph. The aperture is at 8.0, the ISO at 200, and the shutter speed is at 1/60th of a second. This next photograph, similar to the previous composition, but as you see, I only have one of the structures there, a little bit tighter where you're getting that rail along the bottom of the frame. And again, what I like about this photograph is not having any dead space at the bottom, especially when you're trying to show the bridge, which actually fills a lot of the frame on the left-hand side. The old town is kind of small in the picture, so to me, it's very important to have something filling up that dead space on the bottom, and I thought this really worked out well. Like they say, always look behind you, and when I look behind me, I see the beautiful sunrise. It gave me a great opportunity to do some silhouette photos of the bridge, and also to see what the star effect is. And I think the starburst is fine. This is an aperture of f/20, and the reason I did that was to go ahead and try to get as much of a star effect as I could possibly get. What I'm really happy with is that you don't really see any ghosting And a very clear image with a 16mm lens, I think is really outstanding. My shutter speed for this was 1/250th of a second. The aperture was f20 and the ISO was at 200. And then I went around the back of the bridge where I can go ahead and get behind the structure. I really like this composition because it's really frame filling. I have the sunrise to the left hand side. The aperture now is f22. You get a little bit more of that star effect. You don't see any ghosting in the image. And what I love is that I use the structure on the right hand side to really fill the frame in. Then I have that leading line of the guardrail along the bottom, and I love the way it curves out into the center of the picture, and it leads into the two structures of the bridge. And I think this is a really nice composition. Then as I'm starting to walk closer and closer to the city, and you can tell I'm getting closer because the buildings are getting a little bit bigger in the photograph, I'm trying to always keep something interesting in the foreground so that I don't have a bunch of dead space. Same type of thought behind this picture. I have the left side of the bridge with the leading line into the city. Always trying to photograph where I'm not seeing you know, a car being a distraction on the bridge, and the sunlight is still beautiful on this image. Now I've gone ahead and reached the end of the bridge, and then at the end there's two lamp posts, and I thought it was a good opportunity to take a vertical photograph where I would have these two posts on each side of the image. Distortion is not bad. I'm a little bit low to the ground for this composition, so the lamp posts are going backwards a little bit. One of the beautiful things about this lens is that it's not bubbled out in the front. It's a lens that you can go ahead and mount a 77mm filter to the front of the lens. As I was reaching the old town, I figured I'd walk off to my right because I wanted to go in a direction where I had the best possible lighting, and it gave me a really good opportunity to get some photos of the old Spanish fort. I have the leading lines into the fort. I like that I have a structure on each of these edges. Really nice image as far as no real distortions. You know, the building's not falling backwards or anything like that. I think the colors are outstanding. You can see the sharpness here. You can read the wording on the signs on the bottom left hand side. The aperture was f10 and my shutter speed was 1/100th of a second, and I still kept it at an ISO of 200. This next photograph is really interesting because as I was walking along the old Spanish fort, all of a sudden these birds took off flying, and I kind of just lifted the camera up really quick, and I wanted to capture the images with all these birds flying up in the sky. And I managed to do pretty good. I kept everything in frame as far as the two edges. I have something filling on each side. Palm tree in the front doesn't bother me because you see a little bit of the palm at the top. If it would have just been that palm there, then that would have been a problem because it would have looked like just a pole in the way. So I'm really okay with that. And what I like about this is really the image quality is outstanding. You have structures that are frame filling at the front of the picture, and you know, you go all the way back because of the 16mm, and everything really looks really nice. An aperture of f10 for this photograph, and my shutter speed was 1/200th of a second. Then the next photograph, the birds are gone, and I had a little bit more of an opportunity to compose. And the reason I say I had a little bit more of an opportunity to compose is on the right hand side, I wanted to make sure I gave the photograph a little bit more space so that it had a place to go. I like this composition a lot because of the fact that I think it's really framed very well. And you have, again, the leading line on the bottom right hand side. Then you do have that walkway along the center of it. Again, the palm tree in the front, you see some of the palms at the top, so it doesn't bother me in any way. And the sun lighting is outstanding, and of course you have the beautiful blue skies. So as I'm walking down this fort, I saw an opportunity to compose where now I have that seawall where I'm kind of placing it in the center of the frame, and it's a nice leading line, and then it curves off to the right, and I have space to the left with a wall on the left hand side. I love the palm trees on the right hand side that are just, you know, in a straight kind of line. It gives you something to fill the frame there. I think it's a great photograph. You have a beautiful sunlight still at this time, and again, I'm still at f10 and for my aperture, and I think the image quality is outstanding. I think there's a lot of sharpness from the foreground all the way to the back. Like I said before, always look back. Frame filling on the left. I have a little bit of a tree on the right. As you can see in this picture, you're going to see my shadow on the bottom right hand side, so it proves that I was actually really there. From that same location, I went ahead and turned around a little bit and looked for different compositions, and then now I see where I can go ahead and use the handicap ramp and compose it in the picture. So I'm filling the bottom of the frame. To the left I have the ocean, and then at the bottom you're also seeing part of the wall of the structure that's there. And then I'm filling on the right hand side. I have that sun on the left hand side. I'm dealing a little bit with a more complicated exposure as the sun is rising higher and higher. For this photograph, my aperture was at f8 and the shutter speed was 1/25th of a second, and I shot it at an ISO of 125 also. Then I finally made it into the old town. I wanted to go ahead and compose this photograph where I had something interesting in the foreground. And what I found to be interesting was this bench at the front. I have that sidewalk that has a little bit of an S-curve along with the street having an S-curve a little bit. And it was just a really nice composition because the lighting is very nice and lit up the old town in a really nice way. It used to be an old fortified town, so there's a wall that surrounds the old town, and there's a walkway through like a gate. And I went ahead and framed it in a way where you're looking into the old town a little bit. Now you see where I changed the composition, and I like this photo much more. Lost out on including the old fortified wall, but I gain in getting the S-curve road and also the structure on the left hand side lit really nice with a palm tree. I have the trees on the right hand side that are lit up nice and filling the top of the frame, so there's not a bunch of dead space. The only thing I would do with this photograph if I wanted to edit it myself out of the picture, because you can see here that my shadows in the photograph also on this photo. Then I wanted to go ahead and compose it just a little bit different. I wanted to try to bring at least some part of that wall because I felt that wall would help me frame the image. So for this next image, I was able to include a little bit of the column from the wall. And then you have the kind of the S-curve going into the old town and the beautiful sunlight still. Now I started walking towards the old structures in the town, and beautiful lighting. I like the way the street goes in front of these buildings, giving you like a leading line. And I really thought this image worked out well. And you can still see that little white dot on the top, and that's the moon. It showed just how much distortion you get with the 60mm lens. The aperture for this image was at 6.3. I started to walk the old town, and I came across this home that had a lot of landscaping in front of it and really beautiful lighting. And I thought it made for a really nice picture. For this photograph, the aperture was at 6.3. I kept that fence on the left-hand side. That gave me a leading line again, and you see the sidewalk. And I also like the fact that it filled the foreground. Then I changed the composition a little bit. I'm still filling the foreground, but this time I'm doing it with the plants that are in the front. I have the top of the image that's being framed by the trees, 6.3 for my aperture, and the ISO is at 125 with a shutter speed of 320. Really happy with the way I was taking photos this day, because you're going to see that there's multiple compositions of most of the images that I shot in this outing. I like the walkway going down the middle of the cemetery, and it gives you again a leading line. You'll have the structure in the background that has the trees kind of framing it, so I thought it worked out pretty good. Then I changed the composition to this one that I like a whole lot better. I like that it's framed with that tree on the right hand side and it's framed along the top. You're going to see a couple of different compositions with this one. I'm really happy with the lighting. Again, I'm filling that bottom of the frame. Kind of funny because I've been thinking lately how I don't seem to see hibiscus anymore in Florida, and they used to be so prevalent. This home had a really nice red hibiscus in front of it, and I thought it gave me a nice opportunity to compose an image where I have that flower in the front, and also to see just how good the autofocus worked and something close up and how close I could get to it. I like the composition. On the bottom you have a frame filling from the left hand side, and then on the right hand side you have that staircase that goes up at an angle. The composition is very nice. I wanted to see how close I can get with this lens. I'm not very far away from the flower, and I actually used the back of the screen for this composition as I had the fence in front of me and I was kind of having to lean over. And I'm really happy with this, and the fact that you see the front part of the flower and the little red stems on it that are sharp. It had an aperture of f9 for this image. The ISO was 125 and the shutter speed at 1/100th of a second. That little red hibiscus in the background just giving you a little pop of red along the back. On the right hand side, that staircase, and then on the top you have the railing, which gives you a nice closing to the composition. So I think it really worked out great. I like the fact that I didn't crop out the end of the home at the top. On the right hand side you see the edge of the home, and then you have some blue sky there, so it's not cut off. As you can see with this image, because I focus on the flower at the front, that you'll see that the structure is a little bit blurry. It's a little bit soft. Very happy with the colors and the way these images came out. This image here, I have the staircase along the bottom, you know, to give me something from the bottom of the image to frame it with, and gives you like a leading line. The trees on the left hand side kind of close in that composition as far as framing it. I do like the fact that the house lights are on. I think was the first thing that drew my attention, was that I was going to get these lamps that are lit. The fact that the awning kind of frames it, and also the red brick roof tiles along the top giving it a little bit of a frame. Then for this next photograph, I thought this was kind of interesting because I like the fact that on the right hand side I closed the frame in by having that window, and I really think that's pretty
cool because the background is the one receiving the nice light. So I wanted to get a nice picture of that home. Things weren't all that interesting around it. And I figured if I could make something interesting on that right-hand side, so you have the window, you have the staircase again, giving you a place for your eyes to go. You do have that driveway along the bottom of the picture. And you know, I think the image really worked out pretty nice. This photograph here I did is I went ahead and composed it in a way where at the bottom I'm getting those two windows to give you something of interest in the bottom of the picture. I like the little tower that's orange and gives you that pop of color with dark blue skies. I did close the aperture down to f13 for this image, because I wanted to make sure that everything was in focus. Now this image here of the home, love the way the tree frames it from the right hand side. Came across this church. I thought it was a good opportunity to take a picture of it and try to get an entire building in the image. It's kind of funny because when I first started photography, I was always trying to avoid street lights and phone lines, power lines, stop signs. But now for some reason I find it interesting. I think it works with the images for some reason. Don't know why, but for some reason I kind of like them, and now I try to find ways to include them in my images. This picture here was a 6.3. The building is leaning back a little bit because I got down a little bit low for the image. This has got to be the most beautiful church in St. Augustine. For this image here, I really did a really nice job of filling in the frame. I love the right hand side, you know, where I have the window and the top of the tower with the opening. On the left hand side, I have the church with the cross on the top, and you can see a little white speck. I have the moon in between the building, almost in the middle. But I also love at the bottom where I have the shrubbery, and then I also have the concrete wall that makes it like a nice S-curve along the bottom. This is really a nice composition because there's something everywhere, and you know, you'll look at it and you know, my eyes kind of go to that center doorway. It goes off to the right and it sees that window, and then I go up to the top and I see the tower with the cross and the moon there. So I think it's a really nice image. And then I went ahead and backed up, and I wanted to see how much of the building I could get in the picture with the 60mm lens. Part of my thinking for purchasing the Viltrox 16mm lens was the fact that I don't feel like I shoot that wide that often. Originally, I was thinking of purchasing the Nikon 14 to 30mm f4 lens, $1,100-$1,200 on sale, I believe. And this lens was an amazing price, under $600. I believe it's actually gone up in price since I purchased it. I think it's actually like $50, $60 more now. The reviews on it were outstanding. It has a lot of features. It has custom function buttons on it. It has an aperture ring that can be clickable or not clickable for video shooters. A lot of people are actually using this lens for astrophotography because of the 1.8 aperture and the 16mm. You have that little LCD screen on there that will show you like a distance scale. The lens is really feature packed. It's got weather resistant. And the quality thus far is very impressive on this lens. I went ahead and got a little bit closer to the building. I am angling the lens up a little bit, so you're going to see the building falling back a little bit. I kind of filled the frame on each side, and again, I still have that beautiful sunlight. Then I was able to walk over to the left a little bit, and I was able to compose where I fill in the frame. I liked on the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see there's a structure there that's got just a kiss of light in it, which is really interesting because you have all these dark trees around it. You have that little structure that's lit, and also the bottom trunks of the trees that are also lit. Picture just doesn't go black on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you'll see that tree at the front. It has a nice kiss of light on it, and then the building just has gorgeous lighting on it. For this image of the church, as you can see, many different compositions, and I'm really happy about the effort that I put into this. I love the palm tree coming from the right-hand side, curving in towards the building, and top of the branches that are there to give you something at the top. I like the fact that the bottom of the frame also is frame filled. I have some shrubbery and some flowers on the left hand side. I think the image is really composed very nice. The aperture for this image was f10 and the shutter speed was 250 with an ISO of 125. Again, another image of the church with which is great because it's showing you different compositions. Really awesome when you go out there and you see that you really work a location or a specific photo because you know that you put in a really good effort. This was taken at f10 again. I love the fact that I have some flowers at the bottom of the picture so that I don't have a bunch of dead space. If anything, that little sidewalk on the bottom maybe bothers me a little bit. I went ahead and shot this in black and white because I thought it was just a really nice image. I went ahead and closed the aperture because I wanted everything to be in sharp focus because there's a lot of depth to this image and I'm relatively close to it. Having a day where you're really seeing good, I went ahead and shot the image horizontally, and that made for another nice composition that's different. So I have two different compositions in just a small area. You can see that there's a lot of opportunities if you go looking for it to take a picture of the same subject and make it look different. Again, aperture of f13 so that I can get that depth of field, and so everything is nice and sharp. I love the strong contrast of the white where it's being lit and the dark black of the shadowed areas of the staircase. I ran into the old Flagler Hotel, which is now Flagler College in St. Augustine, and I liked this red bike at the front of the building. It kind of got my attention. It gave me an opportunity to take 2 images at 2 different apertures so that I could see the difference. So for this first image, I went ahead and shot it at 1.8. Then for the next image of the bike, I closed down the aperture to 5.6. As you can see in the image, you'll see that there is more blur on the building where it's at 1.8 than there is in the image that's at 5.6. Now this next image of the actual staircase up into the building, I thought was kind of interesting because I could totally feel the frame. I have the windows along the top that are being lit really nice by the sunlight. I have the concrete rail on the right hand side that is being lit a little bit. It was a bit darker than what you'll see in the image. I went ahead and with Photoshop and brought out the shadows quite a bit on this image. That's pretty good to see what great image quality you get with this lens, and the Nikon Z8 camera held up quite a bit as I'm bringing up those shadows. But I like the image because it's frame filling, and the leading line from the right hand side, you have leading lines from the staircase, and then you have those windows along the top. I did it horizontal to have 2 different compositions. I used that wall on the right hand side to have a leading line, the staircase on the bottom, the windows there to give me something to fill in the left so it's not dead space, and of course you have the walkway into the doors of the library. For this image, I went ahead and closed the aperture at 9.0 because I wanted to have enough depth of field to make sure that I had everything in sharp focus. From the other side, so here's 3 different compositions of the same subject. Then I got a great opportunity to go inside of one of the churches. I thought this was a good opportunity to see how well the image stabilizer of the Nikon Z8 performs because the lens is not image stabilized. So I wanted to see just how well I can go ahead and handhold the picture indoors. This is done at 1/30th of a second. My aperture is actually 1.8 for this image at an ISO of 125. And it's that 1.8 aperture that gives me the ability to shoot at such a low ISO. I focus on the saint at the back of the church because I wanted to make sure that the face was in sharp focus. I think the lines along the bottom from the benches, it works out really good. There's no real distortion there. There's just enough light there where it's not something black and distracting. The floor on the bottom has a really nice pattern, and it's a little brighter. Something catching your eyes everywhere. Red roof along the top right, and then you see on the right hand corner you see that arch, so that gives you something at the end of the image also. Again, not a dead space. Then I wanted to see just how close I could get to this candle and throw out that background. I thought it was a pretty interesting image. I shot it at 1.8. my ISO is 125 and the shutter speed is 1/20th of a second. It's handheld. Shows you how even at 16 millimeters with an aperture this wide on a full frame camera, how you could throw out that background and make your foreground subject pretty interesting. Then I went ahead and got in front of the candle and took an image of the entire church so that I could see, just how much I can get in with 16 millimeters. It's handheld at 1/20th of a second. The ISO is at 125. So then I changed the composition a little bit. Along the top, you have that red roof. You have those windows along the top left. Really cool how I have all these leading lines to the center of the church, even having taken the photograph at an angle. 1.8 was my aperture. The ISO is 125. And the shutter speed for this image was actually 1/40th of a second. Went ahead and went to the outside of the church. Like this composition where I filled it right hand side with the statue. And then I like the sidewalk on the bottom with the green grass to the left hand side. And I like that door on the left that gives you something of interest on the left hand side. The top is not dead space either because I have all those windows. I like the corner to corner sharpness. Not a lot of distortion. Remember, it's a 60 millimeter lens. There's going to be some. For the picture, the shutter speed was 1/40th of a second. The aperture was 5.6 and my ISO was 125. I took a picture of the statue and I focused on the eyes and framed from the bottom where I have the hands kind of fill in the frames. And for this image, I actually used an aperture of f22 and an ISO of 64, which is the first time I went down that low with my ISO. The nice thing about walking around with a camera is that sometimes people approach you and you get into some nice conversations. And the gentleman that takes care of the church was telling me how everybody that comes to take a video or take pictures of this church always takes this one angle. The only problem I have with the angle is that it was going to be backlit. I don't particularly like it in the sense that I'm getting the back of the statue. He was so happy about sharing this with me that I wanted to make sure I gave it a good shot to take a nice image. I did really good considering it's backlit quite a bit. I have the trees on the right hand side kind of closing in the composition. I have the palms at the bottom doing a nice job. And you have the church along the top. And this image was shot at 7.1 and the ISO was 125 and that shutter speed was 1/200th of a second. Some thoughts about the lens. I'm really impressed with it. All the reviews are outstanding. I've seen them from multiple sources, from YouTube, going to websites and reading reviews on the lens. Everybody talks highly about it. A lot of well-known photographers that are actually using this lens. For me, when I got into the Nikon system, I had a choice to make as far as gear when I first bought into it. And I went ahead and made the choice where I bought the Z8 when it was on promotion with the 24-120 lens. When I was thinking about wide angle, I was thinking the 14-30 f4 would probably be a lens that I would consider. The 14mm was kind of attractive to me. All the great reviews on the Viltrox 16mm. I saw it was a 1.8, a lot of features on it. It has a USB-C so that you can do firmware updates. It's not in the exterior, so you don't have to worry about any dirt or water getting in there. The Viltrox did an amazing job of putting this lens together, really well thought out. Feels like a pro lens. It's a solid metal construction. It's not a light lens. The 77mm filter thread comes with a lens hood, which is a nice touch. You don't need to go out and buy one. It is weather sealed. It has that clickable and declickable aperture ring for those people that want to do video with it. I'm a big Fujifilm camera user. One of the things I love about Fuji is aperture rings, and when I see lenses coming out for Nikon with aperture rings, it kind of draws my attention. I wanted to go ahead and share my thoughts and my experience with this lens with you guys out there. I ask you all to please like and subscribe, and I thank you so very much for watching my video.